Welcome everyone to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're looking at one of the most cinematic, complex, and just deeply consequential chapters in all of American history. The year is 1865. The Civil War has finally ended. The smoke is literally clearing from the battlefields, but the country, it's completely shattered. What historians tell us is that putting the United States back together turned out to be almost as difficult, and in some ways just as fiercely contested as the war itself. And the decisions made during this era, they're still echoing in our civil rights discussions today. It was this monumental task of rebuilding, and today we're going to unpack exactly how the whole shebang played out. Okay, let's dive into this, because we are faced with a massive, twofold dilemma in 1865. First off, how do you physically and politically reunite the southern states that had just spent 4 years fighting to break away? And second, what would freedom actually mean in practice for millions of newly emancipated people? You see, it wasn't just about putting lines back on a map, it was really about defining the very soul of the country moving forward. So we call this period Reconstruction, and it spans from 1865 to 1877. And when we say the South was economically devastated, I mean, we mean it literally. Historical records paint a picture of a region in just total ruin. To put that into perspective, in some states, over half of all farm machinery was completely destroyed, and a huge portion of the adult male population had perished. Railroad infrastructure was ripped up, agriculture was completely disrupted, and the entire labor system, which for centuries had been brutally built on the enslavement of human beings, was now, thankfully, completely abolished. Everything had to be rebuilt from the absolute ground up: the economy, the political system, and the social order. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that number right there, 4 million. That's roughly the number of formerly enslaved people who were suddenly stepping into completely new lives. And they were doing this facing incredibly steep odds. The historical consensus shows they were starting with almost no property, absolutely no formal education, and essentially zero legal protections. Imagine trying to build a life for your family from absolute scratch in a society that just days prior considered you property. That was the staggering reality for 4 million Americans. Section 1, the promise of freedom, new laws and rights. So the crucial point is that to support these newly free citizens, the federal government moved incredibly fast to establish a foundation of rights that had never existed before. First, you've got the 13th Amendment, which officially abolishes slavery. Then, in 1868, the 14th Amendment does something truly revolutionary. It grants full citizenship and equal legal protection to anyone born in the United States, which officially includes formerly enslaved individuals. And finally, the 15th Amendment in 1870 prohibits denying the right to vote based on race. In just a handful of years, the highest law of the land was totally rewritten to guarantee these new freedoms. But you know, rights on paper need support in reality, which is exactly why the establishment of the Freedmen's Bureau in 1865 was so vital. It provided immediate, practical help, food, healthcare, and legal assistance to both formerly enslaved people and war refugees. But perhaps most incredibly, it helped establish schools. For the first time, Black Americans had widespread access to education. And because of these new protections, we see an incredible milestone during this era: Black Americans being elected to local, state, and even federal political offices for the very first time. That includes Hiram Revels, who in 1870 became the first Black U.S. Senator. It was a period of deeply, deeply hopeful gains. Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. Progress and pushback, organized resistance. Now, in history, rapid change almost always sparks a reaction. On one hand, we had these newly won federal freedoms and unprecedented political access. On the other, Southern state legislatures very quickly passed what were known as Black Codes and later Jim Crow laws. Basically, these were specific, targeted local laws designed to artificially restrict the exact freedoms granted by the new constitutional amendments. They included really strict vagrancy laws that could result in formerly enslaved people being arrested simply for being unemployed. It was effectively an attempt to recreate the conditions of slavery by dictating exactly where Black Americans could work, travel, and live. And this resistance, it went way beyond the courtroom. Organized resistance took the form of systematic intimidation and violence. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan actually formed specifically during this period. Mainstream historical research documents that their primary goal was to use fear, violence, and intimidation to suppress Black political participation and strip away those new civil rights. They targeted Black voters, leaders, and even the schools set up by the Freedmen's Bureau, creating an atmosphere of terror that was meant to completely undo the progress of the Reconstruction Amendments. Section 3. The end of Reconstruction. Federal support ends. As we move into the 1870s, the political winds in the country really began to shift. The North was facing its own economic pressures, and their political will to keep federal troops stationed down in the South to enforce civil rights, well, it began to wane. The tipping point arrived with the heavily disputed presidential election of 1876, which was finally resolved in 1877. In exchange for conceding the presidency to the Republican candidate, Rutherford B. Hayes, a backroom deal was struck to withdraw all remaining federal troops from the South. And without the military there to enforce the new constitutional rights, the civil rights of Black Americans were left entirely vulnerable to those discriminatory local laws and the violent resistance we just talked about. And this brilliantly illustrates just how shockingly fleeting this window of federal protection actually was. The war ends in 1865, the 15th Amendment passes in 1870, but barely 7 years later, Reconstruction is effectively over. It's barely a 12-year span. Once those federal troops withdrew, the Black Codes and Jim Crow laws were allowed to expand and firmly take root, persisting as the law of the land well into the 20th century. Section 4. The long road ahead, a complex legacy. So Reconstruction leaves us with a really dual legacy. We saw revolutionary progress in constitutional rights, right alongside devastating setbacks that left the immediate goals of racial equality unfulfilled, which, as we know, required generations of future struggle. So I want to leave you all with this provocative question. In 1877, as federal troops packed up and left the southern states to their own devices, where did the nation's attention turn? Well, with the country eager to move on from the trauma of the Civil War, America's eyes shifted toward the horizon. They looked west. The story of America's rapid expansion into the Wild West is actually going to be the focus of our next explainer. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this crucial period, and I'll see you next time as we ride out onto the frontier.